I'm in Chester, Massachusetts. This town has quite an interesting story to tell that might be mirrored in your own community. And we're going to take a walk through and see what is so special about Chester. And maybe you'll find parallels. The one thing I got to tell you is this community has changed drastically since it was founded. So I'm standing in front of the first church of Chester, and it's dated up there at 1763. 1763 is when the town was incorporated. It was originally part of Huntington called Number 9, and they wanted to create a town called Murrayfield. Or was it Maryfield? I can't remember, but the point is there was a Maryfield already, and they thought it would be confusing, so the state just said, we'll call you Chester. And here's the first Congregational church on the top of a mountain with a schoolhouse behind me, and you'll notice 2 or 3 homes. And if I look the other way, you don't have any homes visible. We're up on the top of a mountain. Quite an interesting old graveyard on a November night. You can see one of those prefab white bronze stones right here that I told you about before. White bronze, obelisks, and then old marble, and even a few slate and sandstone stones here. You can see these are some old stones right here. Here's a veteran of the American Revolution, DAR. It's kind of spooky. But of course, Chester Hill is spooky today because what was once the center of the population of Chester, why they put it on the hill, the population center of the farms that radiated out on all sides. Now, it's kind of a backwater because Chester Village, about 4 miles to our west, has now become the center of the community. It's where the town hall is. It's where there's, I think, 3 churches, restaurants. But up here, there are no services anymore. I'm currently in what's called Chester Village, which is not originally the center of Chester, Massachusetts. But it became the center by around the time of the American Civil War. And that was because of outrageous fortune and geography. As Herodotus says, geography is the mother of history. And you can see the community doing a little celebration behind me. It is that season, and the community's out here with Santa being supported by the local fire department and constabulary. Like most communities in New England, Chester was built around a Congregational church. That isn't it. Nor is the church directly down the street from me a Congregational church. I believe that is now the Town Historical Society, and it was at one time a Baptist church. Baptists like to be close to the river. And there's a river right across the street. Let's check it out. Here below me is the West Branch of the Westfield River, now part of the Silvio County Wildlife Refuge, which is pretty much the entire Connecticut River drainage system. And you can see it tumbling its way down. It'll join the main Westfield River in Huntington in another 8 miles. And from there, travels through Russell and Westfield, and finally enters the Connecticut River across from Springfield at Tension Point. Because of the variable flow of the Westfield River, it can be really high in the spring with the snow melt and spring rains, but then by the middle of the summer it can be very low. This river was perfect for the creation of dams that powered mills. And there are literally dozens of mills that existed along the west branch of the Westfield River and its twins, the middle and the east branch. So the river was really important in the development of Chester Factory Village, but that wasn't it, really, that caused the town to take off. The valley of the West Branch and later on the main Westfield is so rugged. Roads going along the river were precarious and difficult to transport any serious cargo. The river itself is shallow and rocky, even when you hit the main Westfield, and very difficult to imagine using canal systems on. And it really wasn't until the Iron Horse came to Chester that the community really took off. And you can see in front of me the reason for Chester Village's explosion onto the map. And that would be the Chester Railroad Depot. Because in front of us is what we call, once upon a time, the Western Railroad. Today, it's called the Boston to Albany. Now you can see the very quaint community that I'm walking through with its architecture dating back to the 1850s and 60s and 70s, right? And understand that it was this railroad that came through that brought the community to life, allowed a factory system to grow up. Good morning, how you doing? Good. The railroad would allow a factory system. When our good friend George Washington Whistler and a gang of investors decided to put this railroad through from Boston down there to Albany down here, I believe it's about 120 miles, they opened up the Westfield River Valley. And that caused the community of Chester Village to spring up, because that railroad depot right there was the necessity. Because locomotive travel and the locomotive itself was pretty much a new invention. We're talking about steam locomotives that are only going 20, 25 miles an hour on flat ground. And what we're looking at here is a slow and gradual slope all the way up to the top, the apogee of the railroad, which is in Washington, Massachusetts. And from there it slides on down all the way to Albany. This gradient that the trains had to travel meant that they were working really hard. It also meant that they needed to have frequent railroad stations for people to stop at, because you just couldn't make it from Boston to Albany in a single day. In fact, I don't know if you could even make it from Boston to Westfield in a single day, or from Albany to Westfield. So that's why these stops were created. Trains needed to be watered, and therefore we end up with a series of hotels and inns along the reach of the Western Railroad. In Westfield, in Huntington, here in Chester, up in Beckett, down in Dalton and Pittsfield, all the way along, the railroad needed stops. And of course, people wanted to travel on the railroad. It wasn't like they could get in their car and drive to Springfield to get on a train. They wanted to get on a train where the locomotive passed through their community. Thus, a railroad depot was created. And that's a museum today, created by a great guy named Dave Pierce. There were connections between Chester and the whip-making industry down in Westfield. Whips need handles, and there were several whip handle mills in this area. There were woolen mills all along the river that basically took advantage of the wool from the merino sheep craze, merino sheep mania, and bulk reduced, or took the wool and reduced it from its raw form to material that could be used for clothing. So Chester had that aspect to its factory system, but it was also known for being a geologically interesting place. There are several mines peppered in the hills around the community, one of these mines, in fact, more than one, I can't remember how many, was it 2, was it 3, were owned by the famous James Ames of Ames Sword Company. And he had a mine that mined emery. And emery was used to sharpen the swords that were made at Ames Sword Factory. But the guy was also interested in gemstones. And a couple of these mines purportedly produced corundums. Corundums are sapphires, emeralds, rubies. I don't know what they found here. I do know that there's a type of gemstone called Russellite. Another one's called Huntingtonite. And another one's called Amesite. And they all come out of this area. Today, the mines aren't being used anymore. There was even a gold mine here. A couple of them. Go figure. When we take a look at Chester on Google Earth today, you can see Chester Factory Village nestled on Route 20, really between Route 20 and the Boston to Albany Railroad. You'll see it's a collection of 400 or 500 houses. There's an old elementary school no longer in use, old high school. And you think, this town has fallen on hard times. Well, it has. The factories have closed down. The people that live here, if you want a job, you can work for the community, right? You can work for the town hall. Otherwise, you're working somewhere else in another community. It's really almost an exurb now. There's a few businesses, as we saw, that are still functioning here. But it's really hard, especially when the summer crowds leave. But what's happening to Chester Village happened to Chester once before.